Hi, EGE fans. It's with a heavy heart that I have to announce the passing of the world's greatest independent filmmaker, George A. Romero. George A. Romero died today, this is Sunday, at age 77 years old. I call him the world's greatest independent filmmaker because that's exactly what he was. Night of the Living Dead is arguably the most important independent film ever made. It's certainly the most influential independent film ever made. It's almost impossible to really calculate the impact of Night of the Living Dead. When it debuted in 1968, it became an instant overnight sensation, becoming banned in several places, which only served to make it more popular. Both the combination of gore, intensity, the documentary type effect that it had, the matricide and patricide in it, the inherent racial tensions of the time kind of as an undertone of that film, and of course, most importantly, it invented a new monster, the zombie. Now, of course, zombies had been around before, as early as Bela Lugosi's White Zombie, but those zombies invariably were some sort of voodoo-based or magical or mystical sort of undead. George Romero's ghouls, he never did actually call them zombies in that first film, his zombies were, of course, nothing magical at all. He never did exactly say why. Of course, on the radio, in the movie, they allude to a probe coming back from Venus with X-rays and all that. Romero later steadfastly denied that that had anything to do with the zombies coming back. Of course, modern incantations of zombies, invariably it's some sort of plague, and the overtone is always a man-made plague, some sort of biological weapon that got out of hand and destroyed the world. Regardless of what causes the zombies, the fact that he came up with them and made such a powerful movie with them is what's important. Night of the Living Dead was essentially a tale of Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. Apparently Romero tried to buy the rights to I Am Legend and he couldn't, so instead he made something that would become much more important and more popular than the source material ever could be. Sort of like what George Lucas did when he tried to get the rights to Flash Gordon. It was turned down or couldn't get them, and so instead he came up with Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, and we know how that went. And George Lucas is really the only real parallel to George A. Romero in terms of his insane influence and his ability to really truly alter the culture for all time. As great as a filmmaker like, say, Steven Spielberg is, making dinosaurs or shark movies or even war movies, while he made them, obviously five-star movies out of those genres, he didn't really invent any genres. Even when he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which, as far as I know, is still the only film he ever wrote. So at least one of the few films he actually wrote himself. He didn't really invent those aliens. They're just the aliens that had been sort of out there since the 50s. So Romero's ability to come up with a completely new monster, essentially on a shoestring budget out in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, is a really truly amazing feat, and it's why we mourn him today. Romero's post-zombie career, of course, was not great. He never was quite ever really able to make it in Hollywood. I'd argue that all of the subsequent zombie films that he did make, including Day and Dawn of the Dead, don't quite live up to the promise of Night of the Living Dead. But that's not a great surprise. It's an amazing, kind of I wouldn't say flash in the pan, but, I don't know how many times genius can ever strike any one person. But it definitely struck Romero there, and all the guys who helped make him, all his friends, his family, John Russo, all the guys at Image 10, just everyone. It's really one of those. It might be the first true modern independent film shot. I think it was shot in 35. They dabbled with shooting it in color in 16, but they went with 35 in black and white. And while the black and white, of course, looks kind of old to modernize, it does help give it a documentary sort of feel. Now we're going to do a whole episode in tribute to George Romero, who was a huge influence on EGE, and of course anybody who does horror movies. We've done our own zombie movie, and oddly enough, we're going to debut that at the end of the month, around the 30th of July, called Living Dead World. It's actually more of a kind of the Ed Wood version of zombies than the Romero version of zombies. But he had such a huge impact on everything from video games, the Resident Evil series, obviously to The Walking Dead, all the other zombie movies, all the other kind of post-apocalyptic films that were made have something to do with Romero's, from art, comic books, again, Walking Dead, and there's, a dozen other successful comic books using zombies. True genius, a true independent auteur. He certainly is my hero, one of my heroes, and he will remain one of my heroes. I saw Night of the Living Dead when I was 8 or 9 years old on a small black and white TV, and it scared the crap out of me, because of course it did. But on in the mid 70s, watching that film as basically a kid, I saw Star Wars and Night of the Living Dead in the same year, and I have never been the same since. And that's all due to George A. Romero's amazing genius. So here's to you, George. You were truly one of the best. George A. Romero, 77. Rest in peace.